Good evening. I'm truly thrilled to welcome you this evening to a very special public talk. 2 years ago, we started a unique initiative at AUB whereby we host prominent speakers to give mentoring talks. We recently created a website, www.aub.edu.lb/mentoring-talks, to document these talks in addition to motivational videos from all over the world. If you are ever unsure what to do in life, visit that website. I believe that every student is distinguished and that it is our role to give each student a platform to shine and think outside the box. Good mentoring is crucial to achieve this goal. Today's speaker is outstanding in all aspects, Dr. Hussein Tawbi. I met Dr. Tawbi in our first lecture of Chemistry 201 in Lecture Hall, Chem 001 in October 1994, before most of you were born. And Dr. Kaafarani was teaching us Chemistry 201 back then. In the afternoon of the same day, it happened that we shared a taxi, and I paid his 1,000 Lebanese pounds for the ride. That 1,000 Lebanese pounds bought me a dear friend for life. The moral of the story, pay the ride of people you barely know. They may end up your friends. Hussein was the youngest student in our class, and Salah al-Naini is our classmate, and he is right there. He was the youngest student in our class. He was 2 years younger than most of us. His energy was contagious, and his friendly character was magnetic. I'm not going to talk about Dr. Tawbi's career, since he will go over it during his talk. I just want to say that Dr. Tawbi has a long list of distinguished awards and has published more than 65 papers in prestigious medical journals. His work is highly cited, and his impactful discoveries have been repeatedly highlighted in the news all over the US. The title of Dr. Tawbi's talk is Navigating Academic Life. Plan ahead and let your work speak for itself. Welcome home, my friend. Dr. Tawbi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bilal, for this amazing introduction. You already told them most of what I wanted to start with. So thank you so much. This is a true honor and a real pleasure to be here and to be with all of you tonight. You know, as you heard, when I met Bilal, it wasn't Chemistry 201 in Dr. Kaafarani's class. He also remembers the date. How can we forget that? I've been trying to pay him that $1,000, the 1,000 lira for now 25 years. But really, again, Bilal has actually not changed a little bit, one little bit, because he's still brilliant, he's still very thoughtful, and he's still actually really, really passionate. And that was actually even before we all realized that his brilliance was actually going to be in the field of chemistry. But actually what I've realized is that his passion was actually to his students. And I was actually thinking about, you know, things to say about that, and actually realized that what happened over the weekend was probably the best or the highest praise I've heard for Bilal. We actually were talking to Dr. Fadl Khouri over the weekend, myself and Bilal at the Lebanese Order of Physicians, and I realized I've known Dr. Khouri for many years actually before he joined. And in his very short tenure at AUB, obviously about a couple of years, of all AUB faculty, he actually it was really remarkable that he said Bilal for him was actually uniquely gifted of all AUB faculty to know the needs of the students and to actually know how to address them. And that's, again, just a testament to all the things that Bilal have done for his students, again, a testament of his passion. So it's been a very long and very prosperous, so to speak, relationship, and I'm really happy to be here. And I have to tell you guys that I was here on business for the first time in Lebanon, talking at the Lebanese Order of Physicians about immunotherapy, some of the new developments. And it's actually become a ritual for me every time I show up in Lebanon, sometimes before, that I have to inform Dr. Kaafarani. I'm here. And so as soon as I called him, he's like, when are you leaving? Tuesday morning, so that we can plot all of the potential lunches and dinners that we can have together. And he said, actually, I really want you to come and speak to my students. So I welcomed the opportunity, obviously, to be here. In fact, my flight is going to be in a few hours leaving Lebanon. What he didn't tell me is that I was flanked. The people that give these talks are Nobel laureates. Next time it's going to be, September? And the one before me was actually considered for a Nobel Prize. So I can tell you, not to disappoint anyone, I'm not anytime soon. And actually, I don't share with them the fact that I am younger. He's trying to make me sound a lot older. But what I really share with all of you, which I think is unique, I'm not going to talk about research that's groundbreaking today. Actually, the most unique part of all of this is that I was sitting in exactly your seats in this particular lecture hall back in 1994 and 95. Here's where I took my Biology 201 class, right? So, and I lived through all of the things that you're actually getting ready to live through, and some of the things that you're planning. So I really felt compelled to think about what to tell you from that perspective. What are the challenges and the things that I had to face? What are the decisions that I have to make so that I could achieve what I wanted to achieve? So before I get into my slides, which are, by the way, are going to be really boring, but the point is to help us through the story, I just would like to know how many of you are actually pre-med students? Okay. All right. How many of you are already in medicine? Great. And you guys are in medical school? Okay, so you're getting ready to go to the United States. Okay, great. So that's really wonderful, because we can kind of walk through some of the things that we've had to go through. And before we do that, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time telling you about what I do, right? So I'm an associate professor now at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. I've been there for now a couple of years. You may know that it's the top cancer center in the world. But interestingly enough, there's so many medical oncologists there. There's 350 of them just in that one institution, that we actually obviously get to specialize in specific cancers. So we can, focus on treating only one type of cancer instead of being involved in many. Before I came to MD Anderson, I actually used to be at the University of Pittsburgh, which was a really also, top maybe 15 cancer centers in the United States. And we also got to be specialized, but we were involved in multiple other cancers as well. So it'll be really interesting for you to hear a little bit about what it means to be specialized in something, and is it really fun? Why do I like to do it, right? Then we'll go through some of the path that I went through and some of the lessons learned. And unlike most of the Nobel laureates, I guess this is very interactive. Please raise your hand if you have a question. Don't throw tomatoes until the end, please. But really what I kind of thought about is kind of what is the path from start to end, right? And what I tell my mentees, a lot of them are actually in fellowship now, some of them are junior faculty, is that you start your academic career kind of doing this, where you actually have to do a lot of the things that you really don't like. And the hope is, as you kind of grow from, say, Biology 201 to choose your electives in biology or your electives in chemistry, you start to slowly go into actually doing the things that you like a little more, and you start doing less of the things you don't like. That's going to be very particular for medicine as well, because in specialties you actually start going into, say, internal medicine instead of surgery, and so on and so forth. But most importantly, when you have to do all of those things that you probably don't like, you don't have to love everything you do, right? When you're doing all of that, you're focused on this one thing, which is actually what you love to do and you want to eventually do. So basically have that goal in mind. And over time, as you go through, this is the balance that you want to achieve. This is wrong, right? It's supposed to be, the balance should be a lot more tilted to the left, so I apologize. This is a mirror image. But anyway, so bottom line is you would do all the things you love to do and much less of what you don't like to do. So let me tell you why I love what I do. So I'm an academic medical oncologist, and oncology is basically treating cancer. So treating cancer requires literally a village. You have to have people that know how to cut it out. Those are surgeons. You have to have people that, when you actually cut it out, that they can look at it under the microscope and tell you what it is. So those are pathologists. You actually also need somebody that can read a CAT scan and tell you that this is a cancer in the lung or the liver, so radiologists that are specialized also in cancer. You need radiation oncologists, people that can radiate where the cancer started with. But obviously the most important person in the room is the medical oncologist. It's the person that gives the systemic treatments, so treatments that go in your veins or pills that can actually go after cancer all over a person's body. So that's what a medical oncologist is. And I have to tell you, in the past, it used to be considered that like the dropouts in medical school they used to be called the chemotherapists, because we really didn't have much of anything to give. Back in the 60s, we only had basically what I call attenuated doses of poison to give to people. Obviously, all started with chemistry and things like nitrogen mustard. But essentially, over the years, chemotherapy and medical oncology has been associated with making people really, really sick before you make them better. And that doesn't sound like fun, right? It doesn't sound like fun at all. But the reality is, we've learned so much in the last actually 40 years about cancer. We actually know so much about the way that it works on the inside. We know how the cancer cell, all of the signaling pathways that you rack your brains studying in biology, those took so much for us to learn every protein and how it interacts with another. And when we learn that, what we can do with actually the power of chemistry is we can design molecules that go and sit in a 3D right inside the active pocket of a protein and change these signaling pathways. Or we can make antibodies that also in 3D, again thanks to the chemists, that go and attack a specific epitope and block a pathway. And with those two tools, so to speak, what we've managed to do in the last actually 10 years is to almost cure half of metastatic cancers. At least in the disease that I treat in melanoma, we actually cure about now 50% of our patients that show up with disease that's spread all over the body. And that's really amazing. That's something that took a lot of work, and it took a lot of clinical research. So what we're going to talk about today is the fact that part of what I do is treat patients. I treat patients twice a week, so I have 2 clinics a week. And in those clinics, what I do is the diagnosis of cancer is already made, but those patients come to me, and I already can tell from what I read about them, the radiology that I look at, the pathology, I actually have molecular analyses now that can tell me what are the signaling pathways that are wrong in this particular melanoma, and what are the immunotherapy issues or immune-related issues that are preventing me from being able to attack this melanoma, and then I give them these drugs and I can cure them. Now, those drugs were developed with the use of clinical trials, and clinical trials start with actually lab experiments. So somebody figures out what that protein is, figures out which molecule to throw at it with the help of our chemists, and we do it first in petri dishes, right? And then we go to mice, and then from mice we decide, okay, this looks like it could potentially cure people. So that's when I come in. So I'm a phase 1 clinical trialist, and what I do is I figure out, and I have the guts, so to speak, to give the first patient the first pill, to give the first patient the first IV infusion. And we go through a lot of regulation to do that, but it's fascinating. The way that it works and how you observe certain drugs. I've actually treated patients in 2010 with drugs that were the first ever given to a person, and they were actually FDA approved by 2005. The dose that people use every day is based on one of my own patients. That patient took the pills and was doing well for a couple of weeks, and then 6 weeks later came back with lab problems that we figured out was affecting his muscles. And we studied what happened to their muscles, and we decided this dose is too much. We're going to go 1 dose lower, and that became the standard dose that's now used for treating those patients. So doing all of that, going from the lab to targeting the cancer with a pill, to figuring out all of its toxicity, that's called translational research, clinical translational research. So I usually say that I do drugs in melanoma, basically, because it's kind of figuring out how to get those drugs from the lab to patients, and how to, after you get 1 drug, after you get 2 drugs, the next thing we do, which we love doing as oncologists, is combinations. So we're trying to figure it out if you can attack the cancer from 2 different pathways. In fact, we're getting to a point where we do 3 pathways. So triplet combinations. All of those, some of those combinations have never been given to a human before. You know, the pills, one drug and the other have been given, but not together. So we design clinical trials that allow us to do this safely. And as we do it, we also, so I see those patients in clinic. So while my clinic is to give them the standard treatment, I also try to innovate to give them those new therapies. And we actually take the biopsies from their tumors. We take blood samples before and after treatment. And we take those and then analyze the heck out of them. We actually understand exactly what the levels of those drugs are in the blood. We understand what's happening in the tumor tissue itself. And guess why? Because if it works, first, I want to make sure that it works because of what I thought it was supposed to do. So I go look for that pathway in the tumor to see if we got after it. But most importantly, most of our work is designed so that we can figure out what to do when it doesn't work, right? Because not everything we do actually works. So in those patients that we gave them the pills and they either made toxicity or they didn't have any response, I get to analyze that tumor and take from it, understand what went wrong, then take it back to the lab, and I actually have my own lab as well, and being able to test how am I going to go after that one particular problem again, and maybe I need to add one more pill, or maybe I need to select patients that are specific for this particular treatment versus another. So what you're going to hear throughout the rest of the talk is actually how, first of all, again, thinking about your overall goal and doing the things you love, because I love doing what I just told you. It's really fascinating to see patients walk through the door and actually get cured. It's amazing to me. There are patients that I treated with 2 doses of medicines, and now they're 2 years later, had melanoma in their brain, and are actually doing totally fine now on treatment, back into their normal lives, and I've become more of a nuisance to them. I tell them that I should become really peripheral to your life. I shouldn't be the cancer doctor that you should call every time you want to take a Tylenol to see if it's okay or not, right? I need to become the least important person in your life, and that happens. And that's absolutely fascinating. But as we go through this, I wanted, my talk was about planning. I really wanted you guys to think about how to plan for your future, how to try to get to the place that you want to be. And part of that is basically being prepared, but also having an open mind. So this is obviously this guy, I found it kind of funny that this guy Ziegler considers this to be his quote, which is technically correct. But as you know, this is a famous quote from Newton where he was asked about the apple falling on his head. I know most of you know that this turned out not to be a very historical fact. It turned out he made it up. But essentially that when he was asked, how did you think about gravity with that apple falling on your hand? He said, oh, because chance favors the prepared mind. And I think as we go through this and think about how careers evolve, that you have to really be prepared to open as many options for yourself as possible and then wait for the opportunity to come and take it when it happens. So wanted to just walk through like how I got to AUB because I think it was kind of interesting. I actually had no intentions of going into medicine whatsoever. In high school, I had this philosophy professor that walked in every day in French, and he would say, "Tu feras un bon médecin, you will make a great doctor." And I would look at him and like, well, but I'm in Matalem, I don't want to do that. I just want to be an engineer. And then the next morning he walks in and says exactly the same thing, which is whatever. He kept doing that for a whole year, and I kept applying for engineering. Every single time I got a chance, I applied for engineering at the Lebanese University, USG, for tried AUB, but actually had very little chance of getting into AUB. I was completely fascinated by physics. I had read Stephen Hawking's history of, what is the history? A brief history of the universe, of time. And he basically, I read it about like 18 times just in the course of my Bac 1 and Bac 2. I was so consumed by it, and I wanted to do physics and was interested with engineering. And then, had absolutely no chance of getting into AUB. My dad is a government employee. That was just not on the menu. But I decided, what the heck, I'm just going to take the exams. And I did. I took the exams and actually applied kind of randomly to the scholarship. And I actually got a scholarship, which was really nice, obviously. But it was to medicine. They actually gave me a scholarship to say, you can go the full 7 years of medicine. And I looked at it, I was like, well, okay. I obviously, that's the kind of thing you can't just say no to. It was a fully paid scholarship to AUB. I'm like, okay, well, how do you do that? And they're like, well, you have to do the undergrad thing first. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go into physics. So I actually did my first undergrad year was actually a physics major because that's what I really loved. And I'm like, okay, I'll probably figure my way to wiggle out of this medicine thing by the end of the first year, which obviously didn't happen. And in my first semester, and now the famous semester that you heard about in which I met Bilal and got taught by Dr. Kaafarani, I actually learned a lot of interesting lessons. So you know how you guys get your courses to be on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or TTS or whatever. So I actually knew that we lived in Dahi. We still live probably in the same place. And I knew that, travel was kind of annoying coming all the way here. So I had all my courses on MWF. And my physics advisor put me on an Arabic course on TTS. It was one course. It was on, at noon, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And he said, I can't change you now, but you're allowed to change, a little later. And, you probably know the rules much better than I do by now. So there are a bunch of other sections. So I went into that, and I was kind of waiting to change. But it was really interesting because the professor that was teaching me Arabic on those 3 days was just fascinating. He was just really passionate. He was inspiring. He really was inspiring. And I looked at that, I'm like, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to go and continue. I'm not going to change that section. I'm just going to come on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for an hour and a half every day, one way, just to attend that lecture. Guess why? Because that professor was actually that inspiring. And I learned from that one thing. I learned, and later I heard Tom Friedman say it in an inspirational speech of his, that you really should look for the best professors. And whatever they're teaching, go and take it, because you really end up learning a lot about, their passion, what drives them, and the little nuggets that you get from them, like we learned from Dr. Kaafarani, and now I'm sure you all learned from Dr. Kaafarani, really end up serving you over the years. So I followed the professor. It was... Later on, I realized, as important as that was for me and the fact that I did it, it was actually probably not a great idea because I was, it took me an hour and a half every day. I was in a new college for the first time. I was English for the first time because I was French educated. And I was actually supposed to at least get an average of 78 to keep my scholarship. So by doing that, I was being kind of loyal to a professor, which was really great, and he taught me a lot. But I was also not doing great time management. So I still remember walking down the steps to the chemistry department to see my final exam results for Chemistry 201, because that one grade was the one that basically saved my butt, because I ended up getting 79.5 as an average, just there. So made it there, again, learned that, professors are important, but time management at this point is really important. I probably should have been focusing on trying to be able to do better with my courses. The other thing that happened is that I was really, in school, I was really happy on the day of the exams, because I always knew that once the exams are done, I don't have to study anymore. So I always loved the exam day. And as I started doing this at AUB, and the exams were tougher, I was from a school that probably didn't prepare me as well, I became really nervous around exams. And obviously I wasn't, scoring as high as I would have liked. And that continued first semester, that continued a little bit into the second semester, actually all the way to the finals. And just by happenstance, on my last day, on the final exams day, the first day of the final exams in my second semester, I don't think I can share exactly what happened, but let's just say some people suppose it was a big meal that I had, and then right afterwards I went for an exam. But I was actually really calm going into that exam. And it was a chemistry exam as well, it was 202, and I actually sat through the exam and was not nervous for the first time. It almost was kind of bringing me back to the form of when I was in high school and others where I wasn't nervous in exams, and I aced that exam. Before the finals, I was on course to get just about the same average of somewhere in the high 70s, and just with that one incident, I became so much more confident about my exams. I became a lot more, secure going into them, and in that final period, I actually managed to elevate my average to hit the honor list that year. That semester, and that continued throughout. And I really, I think that was actually a very important moment in my academic life, where I realized that at the end, the exams are a place where I can really show myself what I can do, and I was no longer ever insecure about them, and that was very, very helpful. The other thing that I learned around that time, you guys never have to face this anymore, but that physics was not a good road to medicine. So physics at the time, we were supposed to do all of the prerequisites for the physics, and I sat there and looked at, kind of all of the pre-med courses that I needed to take, counted the credits, looked at all of the requirements for pre-med and the requirements for physics, and it turned out that even if I did all the summers and I did all of the required courses, I would have to have at least one more semester. So basically needed 3.5 years to get into medicine, which was not really possible. Obviously, I wanted to get into medicine earlier by then. So that's when I made a choice to look at other options, and chemistry was the next option, which was actually, if you looked at all the courses, all the prerequisites, it would get me there quickly. In fact, I realized that by really planning meticulously, I could finish all of my pre-med courses by the end of junior year if I went to chemistry. So I made one of the hardest decisions I made so far. I just told you how passionate I was about physics. It was a thing that I really wanted. But on the other hand, I realized that being at this institution, having the ability to get into medical school in this institution was actually worth a shot, and I needed to plan my way into getting into medicine. So Dr. Kaafarani accepted me into the department. I think that's actually similarly what happened with Dr. Kaafarani, who was in math at the time. And I had another very important source of information, which was Firas Wehbi, one of our friends who was in physics as well, had a lot of information about these credits, and we actually sat down and plotted together every course for the entirety of the rest of our 3-year degree, so that we can get to where we needed to go. And I think that's where I tell you that really planning things ahead was very helpful. Again, went on, moved to chemistry, and I was making sure at the end of every semester, every time it was the time to look for the next set of courses to sign up for, I knew that I needed to take the summer, I knew what I needed to take in the summer, and I made sure that I'm consistently on my timelines. And I did, I stuck to my timelines, and I made sure that I had these short-term goals, finish pre-med, right? And then long-term goal at the time was just to go into medicine. The interesting part is I learned that as you set goals, you actually have to be willing to really change your goals, to think, again, take a step back and think about why are you doing what you're doing. So far, all you heard me say is I wanted to get into medicine. And I was telling you a little bit back that, it was more engineering that I was in. So it took me an opportunity to come to make me really think about why I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And that opportunity was the fact that by the end of junior year, I was done with all of the pre-med courses. I'll tell you a little bit about the MCAT in a little bit, but essentially the MCATs at the time were given only once a year in April. They were written, this is how old I am, they were actually with pencil and paper. But that same year, that when I was finishing my junior year, for the first time in Lebanon, they decided to give MCATs in August. And it was something that nobody actually had heard about. I don't know why, but I remember actually saying, well, wait a second. So I'm done by junior year. Instead of waiting for April of, senior and basically be in the melee of everybody trying to kind of, study for it. And it was a crazy time. I know if you've been around or you've had to go through it, it's absolutely crazy times. For us, I decided I'm just going to go for it. What's the worst that can happen? Fail, I'll have another opportunity. So I went for it. I had 6 weeks to study for it. I went there and sat for the pencil and paper. There were only 7 people taking that exam. And actually 6 of them were repeating it. So I was the only one taking it the first time. And, I was lucky enough, I guess, and things went fine. So I did pretty well. And so I had my entire senior year to focus on chemistry. And guess what I realized? That chemistry was actually really an amazing science. I was so into this. I wanted to do this. I loved chemistry because it was a hard science, because it was creative. You could actually, especially synthetic chemistry, look at where you want to be. Again, look at goals, right? And plot your way multiple ways and decide based on all of these reactions which one you're going to go with. So I really, really liked that. And I ended up doing some research with Dr. Sulaiman at the time. Got so much into this that Dr. Sulaiman, for those of you who may know her, she was on a mission to take people away from medical school. So that was really interesting. And she was a real mentor. She really saw that I was interested in research and doing hard science. So long story short, I applied to a PhD in chemistry. And I was accepted to McGill University for a PhD in chemistry with full stipend, the whole thing, and literally got the contract in my hand right about when I heard about being accepted into medical school. So it's kind of one of those moments where you think, okay, this is something I really love. This is something that everybody else wants for me, including family and all that you can imagine with medicine. What do I really want? What is it that really moves me? Was it really just the MD degree, or what was it? And actually, I have to tell you, it ended up being the fact that I'm really interested in knowledge. I really wanted to know the most I can about one thing. I always used to say that, even when I was 10, that I want to be the one that knows the most about one thing. And I realized that I just want to know a lot of things. And chemistry was really attractive. It was obviously something that I was really interested in. And I looked at the situation, I thought, medicine is actually a lot more mysterious at the time. It was basically something that held a lot more knowledge to be kind of learned. And so I looked at it. I looked at a lot of other things. Again, meticulous planning. I remember writing lists of pros and cons, literally side by side, and finally made a decision to go to medicine. Obviously, I guess I wouldn't be here if I didn't. But the bottom line is, at the time, I felt that this was my calling and went into medicine, actually in the first couple of weeks in medicine, I got the shock of my life because I was into this hardcore science. I want to discover things, do new things, and being in physics, chemistry, math, I was really excited about that. And then I walk into anatomy and they go, so, the radial artery goes this way. In 60% of people, it goes this way. In 40% of people, it goes this way. There's no way for you to know which is which. I'm like, wait a second. Isn't medicine supposed to be a science? Right? I went into it because that's what I loved about it. It wasn't. Medicine is absolutely an art. Some of you in the room that are in medicine already know that a lot of what we learn in books is just kind of to prepare you not to panic when you see the first patient. But when you go and see those patients, everyone is so different. Everything is so different. We don't know so much about the human body. Not to scare you of all your doctors, okay? We kind of know a little bit. But it's really a lot of... there's a lot that is unknown in medicine. And after 2 years of doing studying in the books and before going into my clinical rotations, I was really almost done with it. In fact, I wanted to leave and go into a PhD. And I thought, you know, I have those 2 years, you can actually go into a PhD. That was the value of mentors, because I went to one of my mentors who was actually a faculty at the Faculty of Medicine. He was not an MD. And I thought he would actually, you know, kind of be very sympathetic. And he would be like, oh, yeah, you should go into a PhD. He literally kicked me out of his office. He's like, no, very few people get this opportunity. You go finish your clinical medicine, and then you do your PhD. If you really want to be into science, you go do that. And that was a bit of a slap in the face, because I was really like convinced that I wanted to leave. So I thought a lot, and I decided to stay. And I started to go into those patients' rooms and realized that, you know, the human aspect of it was actually the most fascinating. You know, despite the fact that it wasn't a hard science, it was really a place where you could help people. You listen to them, you get a sense of what's going on with them, you examine them. And again, it's very challenging to figure out what's going on, and then to be able to do something about it is fantastic. So it was great. But I couldn't kick science out of myself, right? I loved the hard science. So that's when it became really, for me, this became my mission, which is to infuse more science into the art of medicine. Try to figure out as many things as we can, actually generate the data that tells us what's the right thing to do. And that's when I really became passionate about clinical research, and really realized that the science of medicine can be created in patients by performing clinical research, by putting them on clinical trials, obviously by, you know, kind of generating the data that tells you how you should do this. And I just really absolutely wanted to do this, to actually learn how. So if you hear through this, it was basically that I was willing to set new goals. I was willing to look at new opportunities, and I was always doing my homework, literally, you know, doing my exams, doing what I needed to do. So when it came time for residency, I was absolutely chasing MD, PhD programs, clinical investigator pathways, which, by the way, unfortunately are not available. At the time, were not really accessible to foreign medical graduates. And so, so at the end of my first year, at the end of my third year of medicine at AUB, I was like planning everything again. You heard about the meticulous planning, so that I leave at the end of fourth year of medical school. You know, I didn't want to spend a single day that I didn't need to spend here. I wanted to learn this stuff, to go and do clinical research so that I can exercise the science and really bring more of it into medicine. And then I realized about a few months into my third year that it just kind of didn't. So again, I sat for my steps. I'm not going to go over this, but I sat with my step exams. You know, I was the first in my class to sit for them. I wasn't scared of exams, remember? So I was willing to take them and really be ready to go really early. And then I realized, this is really for the medicine people in the room, that staying for 1 year at AUB was actually a really great idea, because I learned so much clinically. We get such a solid clinical training that it actually set me up for going into a better residency in the United States. So for those of you guys who are getting ready to go into medicine, actually doing medicine at AUB AUB is one of the most amazing institutions for doing this. I've gone to the States, I've trained people that come from the top US medical schools. And I can tell you the expectations for medical students in the US, both clinically and scientifically, are so much lower. They get so much less opportunity to actually interact with patients and take ownership of patients as we do here at AUB, that they actually get into internship really much less experienced, much less ready. They literally learn clinical medicine in internship. So by doing 1 year of internship here, it was actually, by the time I joined internship in the United States, I was already at the level of a resident there. Not because I was fantastic, but because I got fantastic training here. And when I was competing with them, when I say let your work speak for yourself, I just did my thing, and it was so clear that I was ahead of everybody else there. The other thing was that I could focus on doing research. So from day one that I joined an internship, I took every day off that I had, and literally I had one a week. And I went into the lab and I worked on rats and did really awful things to rats. For any of you that is into animal welfare, you may not want to hear this, but it was like inflating their colons and seeing how much pain they got. It was really bad, but I did it. I did what I needed to do because I believed that that was the path for me to get to where I wanted to do. Remember, doing more of the things that you don't necessarily like on your way to doing the things you love. And so by doing that, I managed to get into the International Scholars Program. I wanted to do GI because you just heard me doing all of the stuff to, small animals, colons, because I thought that was a good way, a good thing for me. But then I actually was open to opportunities again. Was exposed to how it was to treat cancer in the US, and was exposed to how it felt to be in an actual team with your patient as opposed to anything else. When a patient has cancer, you walk in the room, they know that you're there for them and you're there to help them, and they immediately form a bond with you. You feel like you're on the same team together. For those of you that have seen patients or are in clinical medicine, that doesn't feel the same with every ailment. I used to, go into pancreatitis patients, acute pancreatitis patients, or chronic pancreatitis patients, and it doesn't feel the same. There was a bit of almost sometimes adversarial relationships with the physician. So cancer was an absolute calling, and within 1 week of the absolute worst rotation in our entire department at the time, I loved it, and I realized that's what I wanted to do. I was willing to set a new goal, to change direction, and to go into, again, what I loved doing. And it was really a great thing because, honestly, as you heard, cancer medicine is actually now at the epitome of translational research. We understand so much about the cancer cell, about the immune system, that we're really making breakthroughs. And I was really lucky to be part of those breakthroughs and to continue to make them. So I'm probably going to stop here because I just want to cater to more of what's in the room. I had a couple of points about why you might want to stay at AUB for medical school, but I'll stop here. We kind of touched on some of them, and I'll take your questions.
Okay, questions? Anybody has questions?
Go ahead.
Wait for the microphone, please.
Hello. You mentioned that in your first year at AUB you used to be nervous at exams, and in one exam you didn't. May I ask how?
Yeah, so again, it was test taking, I think, is an important aspect of you kind of doing well. And I think there are some really very well known test taking strategies that help you go through things a little faster. But I think from my perspective, it's really being confident in what you're capable of doing. Studying is important, but really being able to translate that into an actual answer in the exam is dependent on you thinking somewhat more clearly about what you're dealing with. If you're being too, worried about getting the right answer, you become indecisive, and that kind of robs you out of time. So for me, it was actually, again, at the moment, it was kind of rediscovering a form that I had previously, just by realizing that these exams, all of their college exams, they're still the same idea. There's still the fact that you're trying to exercise the knowledge that you've acquired over weeks, months, and hours of hard studying, and you shouldn't let that one question stand in the way, essentially.
Do you think that if you didn't get the chance for the scholarship in medicine, would you have gone through that path as well? I mean, were you an opportunist, or was it more, I mean, if you went for the PhD and you didn't have the chance for the scholarship, would you have had, for example, I don't know, like an epiphany later on that you want to go to medicine, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And the idea, what I was trying to convey today is the fact that you need to be open to opportunities. But when an opportunity happens, it doesn't mean you have to take it, right? So you have to really think about what drives you at the end, what was really the core of what you wanted to do. And I think at that moment, to your point, I actually had the financial piece of it as part of what I wanted to know. I was 19. It was easy for me to say I'll take the PhD because I'll be out on my own, have my own stipend, but I realized that
senior year.
What was really important for me is that, you know, I wanted to learn so much more. And of course, since I had the opportunity and the support of people around me and mentors around me and my family, I took this decision. So I would weigh both situations.
Back there, since you have the microphone over there.
Can you talk more about one particular piece of research you're like proud of, or like something you've innovated in oncology that you're mostly proud of?
Oh yes, thank you. Yeah, of course. So you know, one of the things that we've done very lately, and I'm really happy with, because I think it's capable of potentially changing the way people practice, is actually using immunotherapy for patients whose tumors have already spread to the brain. So, you know, the thing is, when a tumor spreads to the brain, it creates a lot of swelling. And the brain is a very tight space, so patients have these things called increased intracranial pressure. They start having weaknesses in some place in their body. They could actually die just from that. And so, for the longest time, people thought that if you used immunotherapy first, you may not be able to get it to work there. And then if you got it to work there, then you will induce swelling, because immunotherapy is making the immune system more effective, so you create more inflammation, which is more swelling, and therefore you could actually harm those patients. So we were developing really effective therapies for things that are outside the brain, but nobody had the guts to actually treat patients with brain metastases because, you know, of all of what you just heard. And so we started acquiring some knowledge from multiple trials that, you know, this may not be as scary as it sounds. So we conducted this study in 28 sites in the United States, where we treated with the most potent immunotherapy that we had for patients that had melanoma brain metastases. And, you know, to be honest, when we started, I got all of the 28 investigators on a call every couple of weeks to ask them what's going on with their patients, to make sure that, you know, the swellings didn't happen, the you know, worsening didn't happen. And it actually didn't. So less than 5% of the patients we treated had brain edema. And it turned out that immunotherapy actually worked almost better in the brain than outside the brain. And so it was really remarkable, because those patients usually go for surgery or radiation, whole brain radiation that makes them have a lot of cognitive issues, like losing memory and not being able to sometimes even eat. I mean, it gets pretty bad. We could cure them almost with intravenous immunotherapy. And we're really proud of that, and hopefully this is a result that will be published in a high impact journal very soon. So
can you talk, maybe here in the back,
Oh,
can you talk, why did you switch from sarcoma to melanoma, and where were you?
Yes. So yeah, so that was interesting. I told you at the University of Pittsburgh I did melanoma and drug development, but actually I was finishing my first year of fellowship. So fellowship is 3 years. At the end of my first year of fellowship, I was called into the cancer center director's office, which is like being called to the principal's office. Like, what did I do? And actually what they said to me is, I had been at the University of Pittsburgh for 4 years. I had done my homework, did what I needed to do, and that's where, you know, your work speaks for itself. And they had decided to recruit me to do melanoma in the first place, but they said, we really wanted you to establish a sarcoma program, which is a really rare disease. It's 1% of all tumors. It's cancer of the muscles and bones and connective tissues of your body. And there was nobody at the University of Pittsburgh that did it. So they said, we want you to start 1 year earlier, ahead of finishing fellowship, and just do this. My first answer to him was, I've never treated a patient with sarcoma, so I need to learn it. And then I decided to take that opportunity, you know. So I went and learned it at the University of Michigan for a few months, established a mentorship there. So I had a mentor that was living in a completely different city and continued to mentor me actually until today. And I was, I guess, lucky enough that at the University of Pittsburgh there was the infrastructure, but there was the need. There was a lot of patients, and there was some research. The clinical research was just non-existent in that space. So I created it, and it was really remarkably effective. We managed to get patients on clinical trials, and we were getting involved in immunotherapy drug development, as you just heard, and nobody had treated sarcoma with immunotherapy ever. I'm like, well, why not? You know, and that question of why not kind of led me to lead one of the first trials in immunotherapy in sarcoma. And we proved that in some sarcoma patients it actually works. And we just published that in Lancet Oncology in October. It was a study that was a bit of a breakthrough in that cancer, and it really, you know, was very impactful. People, you know, basically will continue to cite this paper and learned a lot from it. From then on, almost every clinical trial that was developed in the last 2 years has taken the study into account. But the interesting part is when the opportunity came to come to the university, to the MD Anderson Cancer Center, they came and said, we really want you to do melanoma, but if you'd like to do sarcoma, you're absolutely, you know, welcome to do it. And again, I thought long and hard about what my real goals are, which is this infusing a lot more science into the art of medicine. And melanoma is a field that actually has more solid clinical data. There's enough patients, there's enough interest that you can generate more consistent clinical data and do more consistent translational research, that I made one of the toughest decisions ever. I was in sarcoma at a place where, and I say I was one of the top sarcoma experts at the time, and I could have made a career just of doing sarcoma, but that was taking me away from my actually real goal, because that was going to be a really interesting field to continue working in, but it was not going to be impactful on all of cancer. It was going to be impactful on 1% of all cancers. As committed as I am to treating those patients and bringing them new therapies, I really am more into trying to impact the way we think about cancer. And so I literally stopped doing sarcoma. And so when I moved to MD Anderson, I don't see sarcoma patients anymore. I don't run sarcoma clinical trials anymore. And I think Bilal wants you guys to hear of this, because it baffles a lot of my colleagues. I mean, that's an academic success that you can build on, but it was away from my overall goal. So I kept my course, and hopefully I'll be able to achieve it.
Right there, question.
You do clinical trials for melanoma patients, but without the clinical aspect to it, does treating patients in an office not get a bit repetitive? Because I mean, in oncology there isn't much procedures. It's more of just giving them the treatment and seeing how they react to that.
Yeah, so remember that first day in anatomy where every patient is absolutely different and every case is absolutely different? In clinical medicine, you don't get to a point where you kind of get bored of that, because it's really, you know, you face new situations, patients that are, you know, every individual, not only is their cancer different, you know, sometimes it's in their skin, sometimes in the lymph nodes, sometimes in the liver, you heard in the brain. But every person comes from a family, from a different background, at a different age, they're facing different challenges. And your role as a cancer doctor is to actually help them through that and help them understand what they're facing, help them understand their treatments, help them understand when it's working and when they should plan the rest of their lives, or when it's not working and they literally should plan their death. And so it ends up being really very gratifying to be able to do this, no matter if if you're giving them the same drugs. But what helps me deal with the fact that those are patients that are facing mortality, honestly, is the fact that I tell them that I see patients in clinic 2 days a week, and the other 5 days of the week, I'm actually working on making cancer therapy better. And that helps me, that helps them, and that's why clinical trials are so important in oncology.
We want to stick to 1 hour, so 2 more questions, please. Right here. Right here.
Hi, I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit more about how to get into clinical research after med school, like the path towards research.
Yeah, so this is also the value of mentorship. So I was fortunate enough to be mentored by Dr. Thuraya Raisi. I don't know if any of you know her. She currently is at Cornell University in Qatar, I think. She's a fantastic person. Again, think about, you know, the best teachers and following them because you learn their passion, and she was exactly that. She was somebody who was very passionate about doing the right thing for the patients, using the evidence to do it, and generating the clinical data. So Dr. Raisa was my mentor, and I told her I wanted to do this. And so she gave me the opportunity to do clinical research on some of the, rheumatology that she was doing. She's a rheumatologist. And that kind of set me on a course to try to get into clinical research. And because of her connections in the United States, she also helped set the course for us to go to the University of Pittsburgh. And so it really does help to get involved with faculty here, and obviously faculty like myself and others in the United States, so that we can, you can get a sense of the path that you need to take to go there.
Last question, right there, please. You can ask right after we close, please. Tafadhal.
If a student comes up to you right now and asks you, doctor, where should I go? Should I do my PhD or should I go into medical school? What would your answer be?
I would first ask them what was that big stone for them. What is it that they love to do the most, and why do they want to do it? So as a researcher, I can tell you that sometimes clinicians that don't do research think of us as not being too kind to them, and thinking that, clinical research is better than being clinician. Absolutely not. Some of the clinicians that do only clinical medicine are fascinating, and they're themselves fantastic and able to deliver better medical care than I possibly can sometimes, right? So the question there becomes more of what is it that drives you? What is it that really, kind of makes you tick? And, to use the, obviously the Confucian saying of, if you do what you love, you don't have to work a single day in your life. That's actually driven a lot of my decisions.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to thank him right now, but we're not done. So let's thank Dr. Tawbi for a very inspiring talk. I would like to call on my team members, current and old team members. Come over here, join me with Dr. Tawbi, please. Current and old, Lana, come here. Jessica, come down. Everybody, Perla, yeah. Jad, yeah, everybody. So, just as a memory, I'm gonna give a small token to Dr. Tawbi regarding this seminar. Oh, okay. Half of them are medical doctors now. Is that us all? Thank you. Thank you very much. So the next mentoring talk will be by Nobel laureate Fraser Stoddart on September 4th, 2018.